Hello, my name is Elite and welcome back to my channel. In this video I will explain the meaning, definition and the example of all phrasal verbs of get. Get about. The definition of get about is to be seen in a variety of different places. Now let me show the example of get about phrasal verb in sentences are: party invitations are the first clue guests get about a party's theme and mood. They are a jovial lot, get about by Wickham Trolley, and tend to be fairly muscular. On average you can get about 7 or 8 glasses out of a bottle of bubbles. Once I was able to get about, a brisk walk helped to lift my spirits on the low days. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get across. The definition of get across is to cross, to move from one side to the other, literally or figuratively. Now let me show the example of get across phrasal verb in sentences are: at the bridge they all halted, waiting for those in front to get across. To get across town, you can take the shuttle from Times Square to Grand Central. Your thesis wouldn't get across if you used too many technical terms in it. An unsteady-looking rope bridge was the only way to get across the chasm. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get ahead. The definition of get ahead is become successful in one's life or career. Now let me show the example of get ahead phrasal verb in sentences are: if only our horse can get ahead of the leading runner, it can win the race. However, the faster we can get ahead with the development project, the better. They are made for poor people in countries where it's hard to get ahead in life. Having led sheltered lives in the north, they had never had to scrape to get ahead. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get after. The definition of get after is to move into action in pursuit of something. Now let me show the example of get after phrasal verb in sentences are: certainly, let me get after dinner drinks and the tour will begin. Ever covet that flushed look you get after running a few miles on the treadmill? If he is found guilty, then he deserves everything he gets after the verdict. Most sciatica patients are delighted with the results they get after weeks or months of care. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get along. The definition of get along is to interact or coexist well, without argument or trouble. Now let me show the example of get along phrasal verb in sentences are: they have asked me to move in with them and see if we get along well. However, equally important is understanding how to get along with others. However, this changes as they reach adulthood and get along well as with adults. Outside of the element marches, there are certain star signs that get along well. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get around. The definition of get around is move to the other side of an obstruction or avoid or bypass an obstacle. Now let me show the example of get around phrasal verb in sentences are: this makes a bamboo bike is an extremely green way to get around. Men's Taver sandals are just what the active guy needs to get around in style. In general, expect to get around 6 months to a year out of your sports bras. The company is expected to get around this problem by borrowing from the banks. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get at. The definition of get at is to understand by investigation, or to manage to gain access to. Now let me show the example of get at phrasal verb in sentences are: the reason they'll buy from us is they get product they can't get at his door. Another ape, too eager to get at them, stumbled over its fallen comrade. The more wines you try, the better you'll get at the sensory evaluation part. You will need a plain canvas tote bag, which you can get at most craft stores. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get away. The definition of get away is to take a break or to start moving, to depart. Now let me show the example of get away phrasal verb in sentences are: you said you needed to get away from me, that you couldn't live like this. It's really tough not being able to get away with anything when you're around. Mother's head librarian in a small town and it isn't easy for her to get away. As she surged forward to get away from Josh, a ripping sound followed her. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get back. The definition of get back is to retrieve, to have an item returned. Now let me show the example of get back phrasal verb in sentences are: I'll take another turn and when I get back, I'll go to the general and ask him. You made a spelling mistake, then I'd get back under your rock, not bother. Put your dummy back into your ugly gob and get back inside your pram. The only way to get back control and internet access was to reset the router. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get behind. The definition of get behind is to fail to do something as quickly as required or expected. Now let me show the example of get behind phrasal verb in sentences are: they show their immaturity as soon as they get behind the wheel of a sports car. But Billy had taken the precaution to get behind a tree, and the drop on his rival. The police are questioning some people to try and get behind the robbery. I have always tried to focus on human stories, get behind the headlines. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get down. The definition of get down is to depress, discourage, fatigue or to concentrate, attend. Now let me show the example of get down phrasal verb in sentences are: Of course, what were the odds that she would ever get down to Houston? The opening line of the record is, "Now let's get down to the real nitty-gritty apostrophe. That's all the soppy stuff out of the way, now let's get down to the good bits." Before you get down to the fun stuff, there are a few steps you need to take. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get in. The definition of get in is get into or inside something, literally or figuratively. You'd better get in gear. Now let me show the example of get in phrasal verb in sentences are: I wouldn't go anywhere with someone, or get in a car or stuff like that. Thankfully, he was too concerned with sports to get in any real trouble. Then stop trying to get in my head and work harder at getting in my pants. The man doesn't get pregnant and she's the one who will get in trouble. Now let me define the next phrasal verb of get. Get into. The definition of get into is affect, influence, or start discussing a subject extensively. Now let me show the example of get into phrasal verb in sentences are: if you want to learn about all of your character defects, get into a relationship. Some mourners wear full period costume to really get into the swing of things. Bacteria present on the cow's udders or on equipment may get into raw milk. While it may be hard at first, you'll quickly get into the swing of healthy eating. Please like, share, subscribe and support my channel. That's all for this video. See you in next video.